The massive white ship drifted through the darkness of space like a floating city. The UES Mercy stretched over 2 kilometers long and carried the bright red cross symbol on its hull that marked it as a hospital ship. Inside its corridors, thousands of beings worked to save lives from across the galaxy. Captain Marcus Reed stood on the bridge watching the stars. He had commanded the Mercy for 5 years now and still felt proud every time he saw wounded soldiers from different species walking the halls together. The ship followed the old human rule that said all life was worth saving, no matter what side of a war someone fought on. Dr. Lisa Park checked her patient list on a small screen as she walked between the medical bays. Today she had treated a Kalos warrior with burns across his chest, a Raven pilot missing her left arm, and 3 civilians who got caught in crossfire between the 2 armies. The doctor never asked which side they fought for because it did not matter once they came aboard her ship. The war between the Kalos Empire and the Raven Coalition had been going on for 2 years now. Both sides used weapons that could tear through armor like paper and left wounds that most alien doctors could not fix. But humans had learned to heal damage that seemed impossible because they came from a world where everything tried to kill them. Their medicine had to be stronger to keep people alive on such a dangerous planet. Lieutenant Tom Hayes ran the ship's sensors from his station near the captain. He was young for his job, but good at spotting trouble before it found them. The Mercy traveled through war zones all the time, and Hayes made sure they stayed away from active battles. Hospital ships were supposed to be safe, but he knew some commanders did not always follow the rules. The ship's communication system made a soft sound that meant an emergency message was coming in. Reed touched a button on his chair and heard static mixed with a weak voice speaking Kalos language. Hayes worked quickly to clean up the signal and translate the words into human speech. "This is transport vessel Golden Wing requesting immediate medical assistance," the voice said through the speaker. "We have civilians on board, including 43 younglings. Our engines are damaged and life support is failing. Please help us." Dr. Park heard the message from her medical bay and started moving toward the bridge. When civilians were in danger, especially children, the Mercy always responded no matter how risky the situation was. She knew Reed would want to help, but she also knew Hayes would worry about taking the ship into enemy territory. "Where are they located?" Reed asked Hayes while looking at the star map on the main screen. Hayes checked his instruments and his face showed concern. "The signal is coming from the neutral buffer zone, but close to Kalos space. There are reports of coalition ships in that area hunting for enemy transports. How long to reach them at full speed?" Reed wanted to know. 6 hours if we push the engines hard," Hayes answered. "But Captain, this could be dangerous. We would be flying right into contested space where both sides have been fighting." Reed thought about the 43 children who might die if they did not act fast. The Galactic Medical Neutrality Accord said that hospital ships could go anywhere to save lives, and both the Kalos Empire and Raven Coalition had signed those agreements. The red cross on their hull should protect them from attack by either side. Dr. Park reached the bridge just as Reed made his decision. "Set course for the Golden Wing and increase speed to maximum. Send a message on all channels that we are responding to a medical emergency under the protection of the Neutrality Accords." "Yes, sir," Hayes said, but his voice showed he was not happy about flying into danger. The Mercy changed direction and its engines grew brighter as the ship moved faster through space. In the medical bays, Dr. Park told her teams to prepare for a large number of patients. If the transport's life support was failing, many people would need treatment for oxygen loss and other problems. As they traveled toward the emergency, Reed walked through the ship to see how his crew was doing. In one medical bay, he found a Kalos soldier and a Raven pilot playing a simple card game while they recovered from their wounds. Neither spoke the other's language, but they had found a way to have fun together. This was why Reed believed in the mission of the Mercy. The ship's library held books and movies from dozens of different worlds. The cafeteria served food that could be eaten safely by most known species. There were recreation areas where patients could exercise as they got better. The Mercy was not just a hospital, but a place where enemies could learn. They were not so different from each other. Hayes called from the bridge to report they were getting close to the distress signal. We should be able to see the Golden Wing. In a few minutes, Captain. I'm scanning for other ships in the area, but space looks clear. Reed returned to the bridge and watched the main screen as it showed a small transport ship drifting without power. The Golden Wing looked damaged with scorch marks on its hull and several holes that had been patched with emergency seals. It was exactly what they expected to find. Open a channel to the Golden Wing, Reed ordered. This is Captain Marcus Reed of the UES Mercy. We have received your distress call and are prepared to offer medical assistance. Please prepare your wounded for transport to our medical facilities. The answer came quickly from the damaged ship. Thank you, Captain Reed. We have many people who need help. Our medical bay was destroyed in the attack and we cannot treat the injured properly. Dr. Park studied the transport through the Mercy's cameras and counted the number of windows that still had lights behind them. I estimate about 200 people on that ship, she told Reed. We can handle that many patients easily. Begin transport operations, Reed commanded. And Hayes, keep watching for other ships. I want to know if anyone else shows up while we're busy saving lives. The Mercy moved closer to the Golden Wing and extended its docking arms. Soon, teams of human medics would be aboard the transport helping wounded civilians and children. Reed felt good about their decision to come here even though they were far from safe space. Saving lives was what they did, and political borders did not matter when people were dying. As the first patients came aboard, Dr. Park noticed that many of them had injuries that looked fresh. The attack on their transport must have been recent, and the enemy ships might still be nearby. But she pushed these thoughts away and focused on her job of healing the wounded. The red cross on their hull would protect them from harm while they did their work. Dr. Park worked quickly to treat a young Kalos child who had trouble breathing. The girl could not have been more than 8 years old, and her blue skin was pale from lack of oxygen. Around the medical bay, other human doctors and nurses treated dozens of patients who had been brought over from the damaged transport ship. Something felt wrong to Park as she worked. Most of the injuries she was seeing looked like they came from weapons fire, but the people from the Golden Wing said they had been attacked by Raven Coalition ships. The problem was that Coalition weapons left different kinds of wounds than what she was seeing. These burns and cuts looked more like they came from Kalos military equipment, Captain. Reed stood on the bridge watching his crew load more patients onto the Mercy. The Golden Wing was nearly empty now, and his medical teams had saved every person aboard. He felt proud of his crew's work, but Lieutenant Hayes looked nervous as he studied his sensor readings. Captain, I'm picking up some strange readings about 10,000 kilometers away, Hayes said while adjusting his controls. The computer says it's just space dust, but the pattern looks too organized to be natural. Reed moved to look at Hayes' screen. The young officer was good at his job, and if he thought something was wrong, it was worth checking. Can you get a clearer picture of what's out there? Before Hayes could answer, space around the Mercy suddenly filled with light as 6 large warships appeared from behind stealth fields. The ships were painted in the dark red colors of the Kalos Empire, and their weapons were already charging for battle. Reed realized with horror that they had flown straight into a trap. "All ships, this is Admiral Korath of the Kalos Empire," a voice said over the communication system. "You are operating in Kalos space without permission and providing aid to our enemies. Surrender immediately or we will open fire." Reed quickly activated the ship's emergency broadcast system. "Admiral Korath, this is Captain Marcus Reed of the hospital ship UES Mercy. We are operating under the Galactic Medical Neutrality Accords and are protected from attack while providing medical assistance. We have just rescued civilians from your own transport ship, the Golden Wing." "The Golden Wing was bait to draw you here, human," Korath replied with anger in his voice. "We know you have been secretly supplying medical aid to Coalition forces and treating their wounded so they can return to fight us again. Your ship is a legitimate military target. Dr. Park heard the conversation through the ship's speakers and felt her blood turn cold. She looked around the medical bay at the shallow civilians she had just saved and realized they had been used as bait to trap the Mercy. The children and wounded people were real, but they had been put in danger by their own military to catch. A human hospital ship. "Admiral, we treat wounded from both sides equally," Reed tried to explain. "Check our medical records and you will see we have saved just as many Kalos lives as Coalition lives. We do not take sides in your war." "Your neutrality is a lie," Korath said. "Prepare to be destroyed." The first blast from the Kalos ships hit the Mercy's rear shields and made the whole vessel shake. Reed grabbed his chair as the lights flickered. And alarm sounds filled the bridge. Hayes quickly checked for damage while trying to strengthen their defensive systems. "Shields down to 60%, Hayes reported. "They're targeting our engines and communication arrays." Another blast hit the ship, and this time the power went out completely for several seconds. When the emergency lights came on, Reed could see that his bridge crew was hurt but still working. The Mercy was not built for fighting and could not survive much more damage. In the medical bays, Dr. Park and her teams kept working even as the ship shook around them. Several patients were thrown from their beds and now had new injuries on top of their old ones. The Kalos civilians they had just rescued looked terrified as their own military attacked the ship that had saved them. "Medical Bay 3 has been hit," came a voice over the internal communication system. "We have hull breaches on decks 7 and 8. Emergency teams respond immediately." Park left her current patient with a nurse and ran toward the damaged sections of the ship. She found medical staff trapped under fallen equipment and patients who needed to be moved to safer areas. The irony was terrible. She was now treating injuries caused by the same people whose lives she had just saved. The Mercy's shields failed completely after the fourth blast from the Kalos ships. The hospital ship was now defenseless as enemy. Weapons tore through its hull. Reed knew they had only minutes before the ship would be destroyed completely. "Hayes, can you get a message out through the quantum communication array?" Reed asked while explosions shook the bridge around them. "I think so, Captain, but it would take all our remaining power," Hayes answered. "We'd lose life support and artificial gravity." Reed made the hardest decision of his career. He activated a special emergency system that very few people knew existed on human hospital ships. When he pressed the red button, an encrypted message was sent instantly across the galaxy to human military command. The message contained only 2 words, but they would change everything. Protocol Hippocrates. The message said, Another explosion ripped through the Mercy's hull, and this time it hit the main medical bay where Dr. Park was working. She was thrown against a wall and felt something break in her left arm. Around her, patients and medical staff were crying out in pain and fear. Some of the people she had spent years training to save lives were now dead or dying. Admiral Korath's voice came over the speakers again as his ships prepared for the final attack. "This is what happens to those who aid our enemies. Let this be a lesson to all who would help the coalition against the Kalos Empire." Dr. Park pulled herself up and kept working with her injured arm. Even if they were all going to die, she would keep trying to save lives until the very end. That was what it meant to be human and what it meant to serve aboard a hospital ship. But as she worked, she wondered if the message Reed had sent would reach anyone in time to matter. The Mercy drifted helplessly in space as the Kalos ships moved closer for the killing blow. The great white hospital ship that had saved thousands of lives was about to become another casualty of war. But somewhere in the darkness between the stars, Reed's message was racing toward people who would not let this attack go unanswered. The red cross painted on the Mercy's hull was now scorched and damaged, but its meaning would soon be felt throughout the galaxy in ways that Admiral Korath could never imagine. The message that Captain Reed had sent traveled faster than light through quantum communication networks built by humans across the galaxy. Protocol Hippocrates was a special signal that meant only one thing: someone had attacked a human hospital ship. The message reached military command on Earth in less than 3 minutes. Admiral Kate Morrison was reviewing battle reports in her office when the emergency signal came through. She was a tall woman with gray hair and scars on her hands from years of fighting in space battles. When she read the two words on her screen, her face went completely cold, and she immediately activated the fleet communication system. "This is Admiral Morrison to all ships in the 7th Fleet," she said into her microphone. "We have a protocol Hippocrates situation in the neutral buffer zone. All vessels are to drop everything and proceed to these coordinates at maximum speed." "This is not a drill." The response was immediate and terrifying. 23 human warships stopped what they were doing and jumped into hyperspace toward the location where the Mercy was under attack. The flagship was the UES Retribution, a massive dreadnought that carried enough weapons to destroy entire planets. Morrison took command of the ship personally for this mission. As the fleet traveled through hyperspace, Morrison studied the details of what was happening. The Mercy had been tricked into responding to a fake distress call and was now being attacked by 6 Kalos warships. Admiral Korath was the commander of the enemy fleet, and Morrison knew his reputation for being cruel. 2 prisoners and civilians. "Time to target," Morrison asked her navigation officer. 18 minutes at current speed, Admiral," came the reply. Morrison hoped they would not be too late. The Mercy was not built to survive a real battle, and 18 minutes was a long time. When enemy ships were shooting at you, she activated the ship's recording system because she wanted everything that happened next to be preserved for the galaxy to see. Back at the battle, Dr. Park was trying to keep her patients alive while the ship fell apart around her. The artificial gravity had failed in several sections and wounded people were floating helplessly in the air. Emergency lights flickered as power systems died one by one. Captain Reed's bridge was filled with smoke and sparks from damaged equipment. Lieutenant Hayes was unconscious with blood on his forehead but still breathing. Reed himself had burns on his arms but kept trying to send distress signals even though he knew it was probably too late. "This is the UES Mercy to any ships in the area," he broadcast on all frequencies. "We are a hospital ship operating under medical neutrality and are under attack by Kalos forces. We have civilians and wounded aboard, including Kalos citizens. We just rescued. Please assist." Admiral Korath heard the message and laughed. "No one is coming to save you, human. Your ship will be destroyed and the galaxy will know what happens to those who help our enemies." The Kalos ships moved closer to finish off the damaged hospital ship, their weapons charged for the final attack that would break the Mercy in half and kill everyone aboard. Korath wanted to watch the humans die slowly, so he ordered his ships to target the life support systems instead of just destroying the ship quickly. That was when space around the battle suddenly exploded with light as 23 human warships dropped out of hyperspace. The Retribution appeared first, its massive hull bristling with weapons that were already charging for battle. The other ships formed a perfect attack formation around the Kalos fleet in less than 30 seconds. "This is Admiral Kate Morrison of the Human Space Fleet," came a voice that made Admiral Korath's blood freeze. "You have attacked a medical vessel operating under the protection of the Galactic Medical Neutrality Accords. This is your only chance to surrender before we destroy every ship in your fleet." Korath knew Morrison's reputation and suddenly realized he might have made a terrible mistake. But he was proud and had 6 ships against her fleet, so he thought he could still win the battle. "Admiral Morrison, you are outnumbered and this is Kalos space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Morrison's answer came not in words but in action. The Retribution fired a single shot that completely destroyed the smallest Kalos ship in 2 seconds. The blast was so powerful that pieces of the enemy vessel flew past the other ships like deadly rain. "That was for the medical staff you killed," Morrison said calmly. "Surrender now, or I will read the name of every doctor and nurse who died while destroying your remaining ships one by one." The human fleet began moving in a pattern that Korath had never seen before. Instead of staying in formation like civilized species, the human ships spread out and started attacking from all directions at once. They used tactics that seemed crazy and dangerous, like flying straight at enemy ships and firing at point-blank range. Dr. Park felt the ship shake differently as the human fleet engaged the Kalos forces. Instead of the terrible impacts of enemy weapons hitting her ship, now she heard the sounds of human ships firing past the Mercy at their attackers. For the first time in hours, she felt hope that they might survive. The battle was brutal and one-sided. Human ships were built by people who came from a planet where everything tried to kill them, so their vessels could take damage that would destroy other species' ships. The Kalos fleet found themselves outgunned and outfought by an enemy that seemed to have no fear of death. Kalos ship number 2 destroyed, came a report to Morrison. That was for Chief Medical Officer Williams, who died trying to save Kalos civilians. Another enemy ship exploded under concentrated fire from 3 human vessels. Morrison's voice continued reading names as each ship fell. Kalos ship number 3 destroyed. That was for Nurse Thompson, who was killed while treating wounded in Medical Bay 7. Admiral Korath watched his fleet being torn apart and finally understood the terrible mistake he had made. These were not just any humans, these were the people other species called Deathworlders, and he had attacked something they considered sacred. Medical ships and the people who worked on them were protected by laws that humans would die to defend. Admiral Morrison, Korath broadcast desperately. We were only following orders. The hospital ship was helping our enemies. The hospital ship was helping everyone, Morrison replied as another Kalos vessel exploded. That was for Dr. Chun, who spent his whole life learning to heal people from your species. Only 2 Kalos ships remain now, including Korath's flagship. The admiral realized that his entire fleet was about to be destroyed and decided to try running away instead of fighting. But when he ordered his ship to retreat, he found that human vessels had surrounded him completely. You cannot escape, Admiral, Morrison told him. But I am not going to kill you. You are going to live, so you can tell everyone in the galaxy what happens when someone attacks a human hospital ship. Admiral Morrison watched through her ship's cameras as human boarding pods attached themselves to Admiral Korath's flagship. The Kalos vessel had been disabled by precise shots that destroyed its engines and weapons, but left the crew compartments intact. She wanted Korath alive to face justice for his crimes. The remaining Kalos ships tried to flee but found themselves trapped by human vessels that moved faster and hit harder than anything they had ever fought. These Deathworlders used tactics that seemed impossible, ramming damaged enemy ships with their own vessels, setting off explosions that damaged both fleets, and continuing to fight even when their own ships were falling apart. Lieutenant Hayes had woken up on the Mercy's bridge with a bandage around his head. Through the cracked viewing screen, he watched human ships destroy the last free Kalos vessel with a weapon that turned the enemy ship into glowing metal vapor. The blast was so bright that it lit up the inside of the Mercy like daylight for several seconds. Captain Reed, Hayes said weakly. Are we winning? Reed looked at his young officer and smiled for the first time since the attack began. Yes, Tom, we're winning. Admiral Morrison and her fleet are making sure that no one will ever attack a hospital ship again. Dr. Park had moved her patients to the safest parts of the ship while the battle raged outside. Many of the Kalos civilians they had rescued were crying as they watched their own military being destroyed by humans. The children especially seemed confused about why the people who had saved them were now fighting their own species. Why are the humans so angry? Asked the young Kalos girl that Park had treated earlier. We did not hurt them. Park knelt down next to the child and spoke gently. They are not angry at you or your people. They are angry at the soldiers who attacked our ship while we were trying to help sick and hurt people. Humans believe that hospitals and the people who work in them should never be attacked, no matter what. Through the ship's communication system, they could hear Admiral Morrison's voice as she directed the battle. Kalos ship number 5 destroyed. That was for medical technician Roberts, who was killed while trying to evacuate patients from the damaged sections. Each time a Kalos ship was destroyed, Morrison spoke the name of a medical staff member who had died in the attack. Park realized that the Admiral was not just winning a battle, she was sending a message to the entire galaxy about what happened when someone broke the sacred rules of medical neutrality, the last free Kalos ship tried to surrender, but Morrison's fleet did not stop firing. The human ships had painted targets on their hulls with the names of dead medical staff, and they would not be satisfied until every enemy vessel was destroyed. Only Korath's flagship would be spared, and only so he could live to tell others about human justice. "This is Captain Morris of the U.S. Thunderbolt," came a voice over the fleet communication channel. "The last Kalos ship has been destroyed. Admiral Korath's flagship is disabled and ready for boarding." Morrison's voice came back cold and clear. "Board the flagship and arrest Admiral Korath for war crimes. He will stand trial for attacking a protected medical vessel. Make sure he understands that he is only alive, because we want him to tell everyone what happens when you attack people who are trying to heal the wounded." The boarding operation went quickly because the Kalos crew did not resist. They had seen what human soldiers could do when they were angry, and none of them wanted to fight Deathworlders who were seeking revenge for murdered doctors and nurses. Admiral Korath was found on his ship's bridge, sitting quietly in his command. "Chair, Admiral Korath," said the human boarding commander, "you are under arrest for war crimes against medical personnel operating under the protection of international law. You will be taken to a human prison ship to await trial." Korath looked at the human soldier and saw something in his eyes that made him afraid. "I was following orders from my government. The hospital ship was aiding our enemies?" "The hospital ship was saving lives," the soldier replied. "That includes the lives of your own people who they rescued from the Golden Wing, but you attacked them anyway, which means you have no honor and deserve no mercy." As Korath was led away in chains, the human fleet began rescue operations to help the damaged Mercy. Engineering ships moved close to the hospital vessel and started repairing its hull and power systems. Medical ships brought fresh supplies and extra staff to help treat the wounded. Dr. Park worked alongside human military medics who had come aboard to help. She noticed that these soldiers, who had just finished destroying an entire enemy fleet, were now gentle and careful as they helped move patients and carry medical equipment. They understood the difference between fighting and healing, and they respected the work that hospital staff did. Captain Reed met with Admiral Morrison in the Mercy's conference room after the battle was over. The room's windows had been blown out and replaced with temporary panels, but it was the best space they had for the meeting. "Captain Reed," Morrison said as she sat down, "I want you to know that every person who died on your ship today will be remembered. Their names will be carved into a memorial on Earth, and their families will be told that they died serving the highest ideals of humanity." "Thank you, Admiral," Reed replied. "But I have to ask, will this attack cause problems for other hospital ships? Will people think that helping wounded soldiers is too dangerous now?" Morrison smiled in a way that was both kind and terrifying. "Captain, I think you will find that hospital ships are going to be much safer from now on. We have just sent a message to every military commander in the galaxy about what happens when someone attacks medical personnel. I doubt anyone will make Admiral Korath's mistake again." The Admiral was right. Even as they spoke, news of the battle was spreading across the galaxy through communication networks operated by dozens of different species. The footage of human ships destroying the Kalos fleet was being watched by military leaders everywhere, and they were all learning the same lesson. Humans would show mercy to anyone who needed medical help, regardless of which side they fought for in any war. But they would show no mercy at all to anyone who attacked those dedicated to healing others. The Red Cross symbol on hospital ships was not just a sign of medical aid. It was now a warning that these vessels were protected by the most dangerous species in the galaxy. As the Mercy prepared to leave the battle site with its hull repaired and its mission continuing, Captain Reed knew that everything had changed. The galaxy would be a safer place for medical ships and the people who worked on them, protected by the knowledge of what humans would do to those who violated the sacred trust of medical neutrality. 6 months had passed since the attack on the UES Mercy, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The rebuilt hospital ship was bigger now, with stronger shields and better medical equipment paid for by donations from species across known space. Everyone wanted to help the humans who had taught the galaxy an important lesson about protecting those who heal the wounded. Dr. Park stood in the new memorial garden that had been built inside the ship to honor the medical staff who died in the attack. The walls showed the names of doctors, nurses, and technicians who had given their lives while trying to save others. Fresh flowers from a dozen different worlds filled the room with colors and smells that reminded visitors why life was worth protecting. Captain Reed walked through the corridors of his ship and smiled at what he saw. In the patient areas, former enemies from the ongoing war between various species worked together to help each other recover from their injuries. A Kalos engineer was teaching a Raven pilot how to play a complex strategy game, while nearby a human nurse showed both of them exercises to help their wounds heal faster. The attack on the Mercy had created an unexpected result throughout the galaxy. Medical neutrality was now more respected than ever before, not because of laws or treaties, but because everyone understood what humans would do to those who violated it. Reports from the Galactic Medical Corps showed that attacks on hospital ships had dropped to zero, not just on human vessels, but on medical ships from all species. Lieutenant Hayes, now promoted to commander after his brave work during the attack, monitored the communication channels from his station on the bridge. Today he was listening to messages between different military fleets, and what he heard made him smile. Enemy commanders were actually working together to make sure hospital ships could travel safely through war zones. "Captain," Hayes called. "Out. We're getting a message from both the Kalos and Raven fleets operating in the next system. They want to coordinate their battle schedules so that any medical ships can pass through safely without getting caught in crossfire." Reed nodded with satisfaction. This was exactly what he had hoped would happen after the terrible events 6 months ago. The galaxy's military leaders had learned that attacking medical personnel brought swift and terrible punishment from humanity, so now they went out of their way to protect hospital ships from all species. A new distress signal came through the ship's communication system, and Reed immediately ordered the Mercy to respond. The call came from a transport ship carrying wounded soldiers from 3 different species who had been hurt in a battle near the edge of Raven space. What surprised Reed was that enemy fleets were actually escorting the transport to make sure it reached the human hospital ship safely. As the Mercy approached the meeting point, they found not just the damaged transport but also escort ships from both sides of the war. Kalos and Raven vessels were flying in formation together, something that would have been impossible before the attack on the human hospital ship. The presence of wounded people needing medical help had temporarily made enemies into allies. Dr. Park prepared her medical teams for the incoming patients. While thinking about how much the galaxy had changed, she received regular messages from doctors of other species asking for advice about treating injuries that used to be considered impossible to heal. Human medical knowledge was being shared freely with anyone who wanted to learn, and the quality of care throughout the galaxy was improving. The first patients came aboard, and Park was amazed to see Kalos and Raven medics working together to care for wounded soldiers from both sides. The attack on the Mercy had taught everyone that medical personnel were sacred and should never be harmed. But it had also shown them that healing was more important than fighting. Dr. Park called one of the Raven medics. "We have a patient with internal injuries that we cannot treat with our equipment. Can your surgical teams help him?" "Of course," Park replied immediately. "Bring him to Medical Bay 5 and we will take care of him right away." As she worked to save the wounded soldier's life, Park realized that this was exactly what the medical profession should be. Species that had been enemies for generations were now working together to heal the injured and sick. The terrible attack on their ship had somehow created something beautiful, a galaxy where medical neutrality was truly respected and protected. Admiral Morrison visited the Mercy during its stop at a supply station near human space. She walked through the medical bays and saw the results of her fleet's actions 6 months earlier. Wounded beings from dozens of different species were being treated by medical teams that included humans, Kalos, Ravens, and many others working together. "Captain Reed," Morrison said as they met in the ship's conference room, "I want you to know that what happened here has changed everything. We have reports that medical ships throughout the galaxy are now safer than they have ever been. Military commanders who used to ignore hospital ships are now providing them with escort fleets. Reed looked out the window at the space around them, where ships from former enemy species were working together to transfer medical supplies to the Mercy. Admiral, I think we learned something important about the galaxy. Most people want to do the right thing, but sometimes they need to be reminded what happens when they don't. The Admiral nodded and smiled. The trial of Admiral Korath was broadcast across the galaxy last month. When he testified about what happened to his fleet after attacking your ship, every military leader in known space got the message. No one wants to face the consequences of harming medical personnel. As the Mercy prepared to leave the supply station and continue its mission, Captain Reed addressed his crew over the ship's communication system. He stood in the memorial garden surrounded by the names of those who had died defending the principle that medical personnel should never be harmed. 6 months ago, we lost friends and colleagues to an attack that should never have happened, Reed said to his crew. But their sacrifice was not in vain. Today, hospital ships from every species in the galaxy travel safely under the protection of an understanding that we helped create. Medical neutrality is no longer just words on a treaty. It is a promise backed by the knowledge of what happens to those who break it. The Mercy undocked from the station and began moving toward its next mission. Behind them, escort ships from 3 different species followed to make sure the human hospital ship reached its destination safely. What had started as an attack meant to destroy them had instead created a network of protection that kept all medical ships safe. Dr. Park returned to her work treating patients and training medical staff from other species in human healing techniques. She knew that somewhere in the galaxy other hospital ships were also traveling safely because everyone understood the price of attacking those dedicated to saving lives. The red cross on their hull was no longer just a symbol of medical aid. It was a reminder that this ship and its mission were protected by the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The wounded of all species received better care now, protected by the shadow of human retribution against those who would harm the innocent. The galaxy was safer and more peaceful, and it all started with a simple human belief that every life was worth saving, no matter what side of a war someone fought on.